Okay, gonna try and keep this one quick. How to handle multiple objects with different heights coming out of CAD into Bambu Studio. I've put together this file that has a couple of different things in it, different colors, different pieces. I've got this created both in TinkerCAD and in Fusion, virtually the same thing. I was just doing it quick. If I'm coming out of TinkerCAD, you select the things you want to export, and then export. I'm just going to do STLs. Check to make sure you're exporting only what's selected and not everything. And in this case, this is my red, so I'm going to export it as red. Then select just my white piece, export, STL, call it white. I need to select my text, export that. I'm going to call this blue because it's blue. And then I've just got that little floating sphere up here. I'm going to export that as, I don't know, I'll just call it sphere or whatever. It doesn't matter. If I go back and look, I now have 4 STLs, which I can look at and view. Now, notice that just dropped directly to the floor. There's no positioning data on it. Same thing would be true if I were to open up my sphere. It's just going to be right on the ground. However, if I take those things and let's do them one at a time. If I drop one, it does the same thing, puts it right on the floor. If I do the same thing with the sphere, it's going to be right on the floor. Zoom way in, it's just right there at 0. That's because in Studio, you're not allowed to have things floating. However, if you have an assembly of things, a collection of items that you put together, it can maintain that positioning data. And that's this question it comes up with. Do you want to put it as a single object with multiple parts? Yes, I do. Now it's maintained that positioning data. It understands that this assembly of objects has to be in a certain place. So if I come through and say, okay, my blue one, I want to make blue. This is why I named them like this. It makes it easy to see. My sphere, I'll make that one green. And my white part, I want to make white. I've now recreated what I had in just a handful of clicks. Now, this is easy enough, but what if you had hundreds of objects? You wouldn't want to have to deal with selecting 100 things from here and dragging them all over. Trying to manage them would be a nightmare. And I have no good preview of this. I can't really see what this thing is supposed to look like. If I export everything at once out of TinkerCAD, so if I come through, have either nothing selected or select everything, and export an STL, just call it whole, and then I come back and say, okay, let's drop whole in. Well, now I have, it's accurate, but notice it's one object. Coloring this is going to be a nightmare. I could try and use the fill tool, maybe, and get individual parts of it, kind of. So I can get pieces of it, but it's not great. It's going to be a challenge. Even if I really cut my smart fill angle down, yeah, you can see the lines where they're there. Can I break it into objects? Well, yes, I can. So if I come back and break this into objects, but now I've lost all my positioning data. Can I break it into parts? I can break it into parts, but those parts, however, are only going to be things that are physically separated. So now I have my sphere and I have my body. I can't break this down any further. So I couldn't get the text and the white out of here. So exporting it as a whole and trying to paint it is just a painful process. Let's get rid of that. We'll add a new plate and we'll look at Fusion real quick. I can do the same thing in Fusion. Now Fusion's a little bit differently, or works a little bit differently. I would want to turn off everything that I don't want. So I could put just my red pieces in and export this as my red STL, and that would work. And I could turn on just the white piece and export that as just the STL. What I'm going to do, though, is turn everything on, and I'm going to export this as a 3MF. And I'm just going to call this example. Doesn't really need, well, I'm going to call this example Fusion. There's a reason for that. I'll show you later. So I'm going to go ahead, go back and look at my example Fusion. It's a single file, and in that single file, If I pull that up to view it, I have not only my positioning data, but I also have my color data. Now, this is using Builder. You can use this in just about anything. 3MF is an open format just like STL. This is good stuff. So if I go back into Studio and drag this guy over, I'm just going to import geometry. And same warning as before, multi-part. Yes, I want to import it that way. So I still have just one color, but that's fine because all of those body names that I gave it, if I come back and look, I called it like white and blue and all that, this is going to show up the same over here. Easy enough to color. I can just select all of my blue pieces, change it to blue. A white piece, change it to white. Sphere, let's go ahead and make this one yellow. Why not? So there it is. Now, I can do the same things as before. I can break this into objects, use my positioning data, not very useful. I can still come through and select the individual components and move them around if I want to. Helps if I actually click on the right thing. I can move these things around. All the same stuff I could do before. If I wanted to, say, change the number of walls on the white piece, I can crank that up. You can do all the normal stuff you would do before. The problem here is in using 3MF, that open format that I exported to, Bambu Studio, Orca, whatever, they also use 3MF. So if I were to come through here and say this is my example project, this is why I named it like this. If I come back and look at my example project, there it is. But when I go to open it, this is no longer an open generic format. This is now specific to Bambu Studio, Orca, and I think it works in Prusa Slicer as well. So keeping a naming convention of knowing that this is my project file or my Bambu file or whatever, and this is the one from Fusion, very, very, very useful. Generally, I'll export these things with like the model part name or whatever, like it's the base or it's the whatever component, and then the project file, I'll either put the word project in or just simply omit all of those little component names. Just helps to keep them organized. But yeah, hopefully that helps and makes life a little bit easier for y'all.